Welcome back, everyone, to another Taproot podcast episode. We're covering kind of a solemn topic today. This is March 27th, and yesterday was the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse. And I've been seeing a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, Facebook, news channels about this, and so I think the topic that we wanted to cover today is a little bit about what we know so far, but also about a lot of the speculations that we hear around major accidents.
Let me start.
Go ahead.
Speculation I heard was that a sunspot erupted and it struck the earth and it caused electric current to go down the river, and that knocked out the electric power on the ship. And that's why they lost their power 2 times, and that caused the accident.
Sunspots. So blame the
sun. See if you can beat that
It's not an accident, it's the sun. I heard there was a cyber attack, that it was
that somebody I've heard that one.
Controlled the ship and
steered it like
bridge.
Like they were really good at steering ships.
So anytime we have a...
Wait, I'm not done yet.
What else you got?
Oh, no, there's much more that could be a cause here. I heard that when they lost power, the emergency steering system operated the opposite way as the regular steering system, so they turned the wrong direction and ran into the bridge. You heard that one?
I hadn't heard that one.
See, there's more speculation.
So when you have a major accident,
is that all you got? You got any more speculation than that?
We'll cover more of it. When you have a major accident, the news is pretty quick on it for just the views, right? They want to get the information. They want to show what's happening live.
Well, so I saw the next morning that the governor of Maryland was saying the local government, the state government, and the federal government was not responsible for this accident, and they had done everything they could up to this point.
They already know the facts.
The emergency response was excellent, and you can't blame them.
So when you get these kind of major disasters, there's kind of 2 gut instincts. The first is to look for who's responsible, who to blame. The other is looking for any sources of information that people can get. So you see people combing through videos, they comb through interviews, they comb through weird sunspots and solar activity.
The governor said that the bridge was up to code, so it can't be the bridge's fault. He said.
So I think it's important to kind of take a step back when we see incidents like this and recognize that there are levels of investigation that are going to have to come out. And I think one thing that people just want an answer right away. And
they make up answers.
They
instantly.
make up. So I posted. I saw a video that morning after it had happened. It happened at 1:30 a.m. Around 1:30 a.m. And I saw a video at probably 7 a.m. that was showing it losing power and showing it as it hit the bridge. It was a view from, I think, a tugboat.
That's one with the little circles on
it. Yeah,
watch it there.
Yeah. And I posted that, shared it to social media, and it got reshared a lot. And some of the people that were resharing it were already giving root causes, what they said were root causes. They had it as a monitoring error, maybe a human error in navigation. They said it could be equipment failures from the pumping system or possibly the engine malfunction. They were giving out what they said were root causes.
How about this? The bridge had explosions on it.
Now there's some conspiracy now.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, I've seen the conspiracy.
And you see little tiny, I think it's a cable probably going across the bridge, and when the cable shears, it whoosh, makes a light.
There's a lot of dust on the bridge.
But the guy was saying, look, there's explosions. Somebody blew up the bridge.
Yeah. So you see people speculating.
Yes, much speculation.
With very little evidence. Now, our experiences in doing major investigations and helping companies...
At least teaching people to do
Teaching people how to do major investigations. And, the first step isn't... Speculate. It isn't coming up with hypotheses.
Wait a second. It is in some systems. You speculate and then you try to prove your speculations.
Yeah, so some systems would say, oh, you speculate all these possible things that could have happened.
Speculate all of them, then you got to figure out which one's true.
But I think our philosophy, which is one better, but two is a little bit more grounded. So what's the first step when you kind of are dealing with one of these major accidents? What's kind of the first critical thing that you need to be thinking about?
Who are you?
Let's say you are the company involved in this incident.
Find someone else to blame.
Oh, find someone else to blame. Well, that's certainly the corporate's first mission.
Yeah, everybody wants to find somebody else to point the finger at. Now, it may not be the best investigation strategy.
Let's say investigators.
But I've seen so many times afterwards where it's like this. It's one of them. It's not me.
Let's say the company's doing their best to cover that, but you're the investigator now.
Okay,
I've
got to do an investigation.
You've got to understand what happened.
This will be tough because the hard part is it's going to be hard to collect information. If you're the captain of the ship, are you a prime target to be blamed?
The target's on you, definitely.
Yes. If you were the guy steering the ship, if you were the guy in one of the tugboats, everybody's going to be trying to say those tugboats should have done more. That ship should have steered clear. The ship wasn't lined up right to start with. Why were they doing this at 1:30 in the morning? People were fatigued. They shouldn't be doing this at 1:30 in the morning. All these kinds of things that right off the bat people are speculating and blaming, or getting ready to blame anyhow. Mm-hmm. So who's going? So you got the company has to do an investigation. Who else is going to be investigating this?
I saw the NTSB. That they've already launched an investigation.
Really? I didn't know the NTSB was responsible for maritime accidents. I thought it would be the Coast Guard to be doing it.
They probably will also be doing it.
Okay. So we got the company, the Coast Guard. Now, maybe even the people who had freight. If there was somebody who had chartered that ship and had a whole bunch of stuff on it, they may even want to do an investigation or at least see the detailed results of whoever does.
Yeah.
So there's lots of people who should be investigating, and how should they start off? You should start off by trying to figure out what happened. And the what happened is going and collecting facts about what happened rather than speculating about what happened.
Yeah, so on my post, I was just stating you could see that the power was going in and out of the ship. You could see that...
See, I didn't even know if that was true. Well, maybe it was just the lighting systems that were going on and off. I could see that, but I don't know about
correct.
That. And then I saw this big smoke. Why did the big smoke come out?
So I saw some comments, and again, speculation. So from maritime people, and they said... basically, when they restart the generators, they put them in full, gung-ho, and that's going to produce a lot of smoke. And that was what their statement was. And
so I don't even know enough about the ship to know if it was diesel-powered, if it was gas turbine-powered, if it probably wasn't some old steam engine ship.
No, it was a newer ship.
It was a newer ship?
Newer is in last
decade.
Last decade.
Okay.
So
it probably was diesel powered.
And I had heard again speculation. People talked about this has a different type of thruster on it that can help maneuver it around.
I hadn't heard that yet.
Ports and things. Again, it's speculation. And so people jumping to conclusions about needed tugboats, needed different types of these.
It had tugboats, didn't it?
Needed more. I don't think it did.
I heard two. That's somebody told me.
Needed more tugboats. You got to have more tugboats.
If you had a crash, you needed more tugboats.
So it's like people again, they drop all these things. So as investigators, gathering those facts of what happened, well, that can be really difficult at the early stage. So, when we teach our 5-day course, we go into major accidents, which this is going to classify as that. The first step in the taproot process isn't going to be, start digging into all the details. It's going to be stabilizing your situation first. You have to basically get it to, the point where the fires are out, right?
Yeah, well, they dropped anchor, so it's stuck there.
Yeah.
So they're not going anyplace, and hopefully soon.
So, there's some things that are kind of like when you're dealing with the first concerns is safely stabilizing the scene, coordinating emergency response, and evidence collection and preservation.
Well, okay, so the first two are gone by now.
Yeah, well, at this point today, they've
And
done as much of that as they
usually,
can.
if you're an investigator, unless you're on the ship, by the time you get there, those first two are going to be done.
Emergency response is one, investigator may be the other. So, again, companies, you may have different levels and responsibilities based on what your job title is.
So you don't want to lose evidence. You don't want evidence to be destroyed. I had to take some thought right there to say, what's your sequence of events here? Does it start with the losing power, or was there something before that?
Right.
And so then you got to start about, how do I keep the logs? How do I get the maintenance records? How do I get the actual, if they have any kind of recordings of outputs or recordings of generator, what they were doing or whatever that is? All those you've got to think about.
Yeah, your timeline, it may go back to when they were leaving the port that morning. It could go back to the day before that when they were
could
loading.
Go back to some maintenance they didn't do.
So gathering those facts and starting to get, those different types of evidence is clear. And again, when we're thinking about root cause analysis, hypothesis testing is not the first step. It's not, let's go with all these speculative ideas. It is a little bit let's look at what evidence we need to collect. And this is, again, where we say you should have a plan for the type of evidence that you should be looking for. So knowing what types of evidence is important in these situations.
So in this case, to be an investigator of this, you should probably know something about ships and steering ships and shipboard power systems and those kinds of things. Otherwise, you aren't going to know what questions to ask.
Yep.
Just like the person who I said, well, all these ships are now computer controlled. Well, are they? Well, and even if it's computer controlled, does that mean it's connected to the internet? How would somebody gain control of the ship? If this ship is going to go out to sea, it may have some kind of satellite connection to the internet, or it may not. And you're thinking, well, do they really run the ship by satellite connection? The other one I was seeing as well, with all the, what were they calling it? With all the navigation systems, the satellite navigation systems, it should have steered them right through that, like the satellite was steering it. And I thought, well, gosh, that's not the way I think it works, but maybe I'm real behind the times. Maybe that's the way it works nowadays. Those satellites take over and control those ships.
So I think that's another good point, is thinking about, building your investigation team for these kind of things. So getting people that have an expertise. So, when I talk about building an investigation team, I always say, one, you should have a taproot facilitator, someone who understands the process to lead it. So you
They
need a
don't
leader.
necessarily have to be experts in marine transportation.
No, but they should be experts in root cause analysis.
Yes.
And so you have a leader of that team. Then in there, you need somebody who has, I call it technical experience. So in this case, it might be you have someone who has that technical knowledge of the way the ship's systems work.
You'd probably want a captain from another ship that was similar if you've got one. You'd want an engineer from another ship that was similar if you've got one. You'd probably, I'd even jump to, you might want somebody from the Coast Guard who was familiar with all the rules and navigation stuff. Of course, the CO of the ship should be, CO of a ship should be your, understand that as well.
Yeah.
So you'd want those kind of expertise.
So I always break the expertise down into two sides, because I think of it as there's a technical expertise and there's an operational expertise.
Okay.
Now, granted, there are people that have both. Your captain of your ship should be technically an expert and operationally.
He might not know as much about that particular engineering of that ship as the engineer does, but he probably knows something about it at least. And the guy the other interesting part is, if you get somebody who's a captain and engineer from another ship, one of the things you have to work on is, well, is this ship different somehow?
Yeah.
Is this one slightly different? So what you think it works as, it doesn't work that way.
So getting a team with some cross-functional expertise is important, but then you've also got to have something to counteract biases, like you're saying. I'm biased to the way my ship, well, this is how I run it. Well, that doesn't mean that is the way that this ship should be run.
And
it just might be your preference.
And I would say no captain's going to say, I think I'll run into that bridge. So none of them are going to say that's the way I want to run my ship.
I want to go as close to the bridge as possible.
Yeah.
That's critical.
And it did seem to be pretty screwy the way it was approaching. But what do I know about steering ships through that bridge? Oh, there's one more.
You know a little bit about steering ships, but not that kind of ship.
I've steered through bridges too, but that's irrelevant.
Very different ship.
Different kind of ship. Very different kind of ship. Very much more, but it didn't have any bow thrusters on it or anything. So anyhow, let's leave that behind. The other thing I was thinking about is pilots. I heard somebody talking about, the pilot should have done such and such. The harbor pilot. Every harbor has a pilot or has pilots who come on board and advise who's ever driving the ship on how they should drive the ship. And, he should have advised them not to hit the bridge, which I bet he was saying, don't hit that bridge, don't hit the bridge.
Guys.
This is not good.
Mayday,
You're aiming at the bridge.
So when we look at these scenarios, getting those facts and data early is important, preserving evidence where it's needed. If there's, again, we don't know exactly, but I would assume on an advanced ship that you're going to have logs of who's done what from a maintenance standpoint, but also equipment standpoint. A lot of times equipment records button presses, activations, sequences.
At least things like vibration logs and that kind of stuff, so you can see what was running and when it failed.
Yep. And so collecting those logs is important right away.
Make sure they don't disappear.
Video, cameras. I remember...
it's always possible they had videos of this stuff on the ship.
I remember I had a client, and they showed me a video of an incident that they had, and it was a beautifully recorded video. And that incident that they had a picture of, the reason why they had that video was because the safety guy was recording a Snapchat to send to his wife saying, packing up the crane, we're going to be home soon. And while taking that video to send to his wife, the crane fell, caused a hit, landed on a fork truck, almost killed a person. But it was like a great shot because you could see the person running out from the forklift like it was a Michael Bay movie as the crane came down. So again, you can get these things and you don't know where you get the footage from. I remember there's a YouTube channel that still to this day posts almost daily or weekly different angles of the explosion in Lebanon, the port explosion in Lebanon. So they just grab and find them because there were so many people filming things. They had pictures of people that were filming videos, that were just filming their family, filming weddings.
And all of a sudden this pressure wave comes by
and
boom.
Just explodes on that. There's people that were filming the smoke at the time. I remember one of the earliest ones was this. There was a person on the boat. They were on a boat out in the water, and they watched it explode, and the wave come and hit their boat. So again, you don't know where those videos may come from. So collecting that quickly is, I think, an important step in at least building that initial timeline.
Yep. Well, even when the one you saw in that little short video taken from quite a ways away, you could see, they lost power and there's the smoke. That gives you something to say, there was something going on, we can investigate.
And you can see the ship attempt to steer away. Well, at least they believed it. Looked like they were trying to steer
I wasn't
away.
sure what that ship was doing because it didn't look like it was lined up right for either one of the going under either this span, which I'm not sure they're supposed to go over, or the other span. It didn't look like it was lined up well for either one of those. And then its last minute maneuver, I thought sort of took it into the thing, but it was really hard to tell because it was far away. And the first time I saw it, I couldn't even figure out which side of the, is it coming toward me or going away from me? I said, okay, that is going away from me. I think it wasn't it?
And they're coming towards.
Was it coming towards? That's how little you could see of that video. And the first one I saw was really, really dark. And now I've seen one that they've lightened it up, and it's a lot easier to see which way it was going and what happened. But it's been tampered with then. Somebody's tampered with the evidence. Well, tampered with some evidence to make it easier to see. So you never know.
So another thing to think about, again, getting away from speculation, but thinking on, once you've built out that initial timeline of what information you know, that's when speculation can come in to help you in gathering more detailed facts, seeing where the evidence is guiding you from a fact standpoint. And I think it's fair to say that, you know, there's a lot of possibilities, but when you're collecting information, you should be letting your evidence drive you to possibilities, not what your biases are driving you to.
Well, I'd even say one back from that. To start off with, you ought to just be collecting evidence. And some of it you may find out later was really not good evidence. It was you did an interview with somebody and they told you something that turned out not to be true. Or you thought this is what the vibration monitoring system was telling you, but that turned out not to be what it was telling you. Sometimes you'll have conflicting information. You'll say, well, that can't be right. But when you find the right scenario later on, well, they both can be that way. And you just didn't think of that scenario when you were initially speculating, when you were collecting evidence. So the answer is you want to collect all the evidence you can. And as you said, let the evidence guide you. But also, you know, if you got evidence that doesn't fit, that may be just as important or more important than evidence that does fit what you were thinking happened.
Yeah.
And I don't think people can help but start to think what happened. So you really have to collect evidence whether it supports or doesn't support. You just want to be an evidence sponge to start with and soak it all in.
As much information. You're not ready to jump to conclusion. You're not ready to jump
to even though it's natural, you should try to resist that.
People want lessons learned right away. One of the things we talk to executive leaders about their RCA programs, and one of the things that I always ask is you know, what's your expectation for how soon something should be completed? A lot of times executives jump that gun. They go, how long does it take? And I always try to push people back on people, because if you're looking at how long does an investigation take, you're probably, you know, why are people concerned about that? Well, because they want to make sure that people are putting the appropriate effort at the earliest possible time, because information gets lost quickly. That's understandable and relatable and reasonable.
And you want to take corrective action so it doesn't happen again.
Exactly.
Because a lot of places don't shut down until the investigation is done. They continue to do whatever it is they were doing. Whatever. Ships are still going to sea, even though we haven't figured this out. They aren't going underneath that bridge, but they're going underneath other bridges.
That company has other ships.
Well, and other companies have other ships. This may not be specific to that company. It could be a generic fault with the generator systems or who knows what. And we just don't know at this point. And so you're going to have some amount of risk that you're willing to accept to continue to operate all those other ships around the world when you don't know what happened to this one.
So I think there's an element of urgency at, I'll say, kickoff of an investigation, but oftentimes you'll see people set dates. You've got to have this investigation done by
30 days.
I've seen 10. I've seen 24 hours for a report. I've seen a lot of different ones, and what I tend to think is, I think it's fair to expect an initial snap chart as an item to say, okay, we want to see an initial snap chart within, let's say, 24 hours. Now that snap chart will mostly be pieces of evidence you don't have that you're yet to collect. That's what that really is. And so when I think about communicating to leadership, and really what leadership should be looking at, is how is that snap chart growing and changing as they get information. So one of the things that I do when I facilitate, I actually will make copies of my snap chart almost daily. Almost every time I get a large enough piece of information, I'll make a copy and save, this is what I thought originally. And I remember one of the facilitations that I did, the initial snap chart, you know, the what they thought happened originally was our original facilitation snap chart we built out, was very different from what the facts actually led us to.
So some people don't like to put out those early ones because people will then jump to conclusion and take actions based on what's in there.
Yep.
Let me ask you this question. how long? What's the longest period it should take to complete investigation?
So I'll state there's certain government agencies and
You're reading my mind.
and other agencies that take years, and I think there's a balance between 24 hours and 5 years, and I think it's closer to the time frame. I think it takes as long as it takes to get the relevant information back.
If it takes you 3 years to get your investigation done, probably everything that's going to change has already changed before you get your investigation out.
Yep.
And if it takes you 5 years, there's nobody even left anymore who's interested in what you're doing, and you're not going to have much impact to that investigation. Yeah. On the other hand, 24 hours, it's going to be a really simple investigation if you can get it done in 24 hours. That's really surprising to me. And what I would be worried about if I was management and they brought me an investigation done in 24 hours on a major incident is, how did they do this? Where did they collect all the information? What haven't they done to get done in 24 hours?
So to me, what I think of...
so somewhere between 24 hours and 3 years.
3 years, somewhere in that range. But I think it's relative to how much information you need to collect. And what I coach leaders on is instead of looking at specific dates and saying you got 1 week to get this information done, is to set points for check-in, set points for where you're looking at the health of the investigation. Are they making progress? What have they not collected? What
can you do to help them?
And what resources do they need
exactly
to collect and get the process? Because I've had one where I was helping a facilitation, but we had to stop because, and we did everything that they could do at the time, and they carried on because they were waiting on product to come back. They did not have
samples. You mean
samples, recalled product back in time for this investigation to go look at some of the historical. They couldn't really see how far back in time this started at. So it was a quality issue for that one.
We had a facilitator on a major investigation, and they were making really good progress. And then the regulator came in and took all the evidence. And they were like, it was samples, all that kind of stuff, videos, everything. They took everything. And they were like, well, what can we do? We don't have any, all we have is we did interviews and we know what they are, but none of the physical evidence that would help us complete this investigation can we have. And it took over a year for the government to return that to them. And so they just pretty much sat there for a year and said, we can't finish our investigation until we get the evidence back.
Yeah. I had an arc flash investigation that I facilitated, and the electrical components had been sent out to a group that was looking at what was the cause of the arc flash itself, what was the physical cause, and so they were waiting on that information back. So we could analyze everything up until that point, but we didn't know precisely what...
Well, you could do things afterwards, too.
Yep.
But you just couldn't tell why that occurred.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like there's a lot we investigated on the setup, a lot investigated on the checks and safeguards that were in place. And there was a lot of findings that we had, but we were just waiting on that last little piece of, it was this screw that had been drilled in and worn off this wire causing that jump.
I remembered another speculation I saw. They looked up I don't know if it was a LinkedIn profile or what it was for the captain of the ship, and they were from the Ukraine. And so this was the Ukrainians getting even with us because we didn't give them enough aid.
Oh.
That was another one. I saw that one on YouTube, and I thought, man, they could make it be anything, can't they?
They could make it be anything. And so, avoid... This is why you need a robust root cause analysis process that's based on facts and evidence, because if you let people just go with their biases, go with the bias-based RCA methods, they can make it anything.
Yep.
And the people can find evidence to support their conclusions. They can find evidence to get them to the fixes that they want. So something else that I found interesting on these was looking at what people were suggesting the fixes were. So again, I just shared a little video, 40 seconds, that kind of just roughly shows the ship coming in and hitting the bridge. And I had people on there talking about the amount of tugboats that you need, though this is an old bridge and it's an infrastructure problem.
You should be able to hit the bridge.
You should be able to hit these bridges with the biggest ships you got, right?
Yep.
I saw people talking about, one person I saw, they had their list of root causes that I was talking about that weren't root causes. They were causal factors. They hadn't even come up with root causes. They already had lessons learned. They were talking about increasing inspections and maintenance, new training that they should roll out, and improved redundancies. And you're like, we don't even know what redundancies failed.
I saw somebody mentioning training of the crew also as a potential fix that somebody should do.
And I don't disagree that those things could be good fixes. They might be relevant.
It's probably way too early to speculate on that, isn't it?
If it's too early to speculate on the cause, it's far too early to speculate on corrective actions. And I think we see this in investigations, whether it's major ones or little small ones, that people already have their fix before they've got the facts.
They have their favorite root cause and their favorite corrective action, and that's what it's going to end up. That's what I'm going to look for.
Favorite causitis right there. Yep. And so, again, we push our clients and we teach our clients that you're not, there's a process, and we're not looking at corrective actions during the snap chart phase. It's fine if you come up with, this is a safeguard we could have had. We tell them to mark it down, but we're not trying to implement corrective actions in the snap chart phase. We're just trying to gather and organize the facts.
Yeah, we haven't even, till the end of that, we haven't even come up with what the causal factors are, which is your starting points for root cause analysis. So they probably don't have enough information now, probably even now being 24 hours, 48 hours afterwards. They don't have enough information to say these are for sure the causal factors yet. Yeah. And then you'd start taking those through the root cause tree, and you'd have to have all the information to do that. And so let's just say somebody on the bridge team made a mistake. I'm not saying that's what it is. But if that was one of your causal factors, you then start looking at it was a human performance difficulty, and what were the factors that influenced that. And you'd start going through the questions, the 15 questions. And the first one would talk about fatigue and things like that. And maybe that's a potential factor. You don't know. So you then have to maybe go back and even say, I didn't even look into fatigue. I need to go collect information of that. And it isn't, I remember one guy said, well, they were wearing standard watches, so it can't be fatigue. Well, how do you know? Was the guy getting sleep in between his standard watches? Was his sleep cycles all messed up? Was he doing some other kind of work or playing video games maybe in between so he didn't get any sleep? How do you know it wasn't fatigue? How do you prove that it wasn't? Not prove that it was.
Yeah. So I think when we look at, the types of things that people need to do, that first 24 hours can be pretty critical for memory, can be pretty critical for getting information.
Listen. You're never going to get there to collect short-term memory.
Yep.
You got to be there in like 15 minutes to do that.
You're arriving as the person,
And just as the incident concludes, you're never going to get there. If you're 24 to 48 hours afterwards, they don't have fresh memories anymore. They have contaminated memories because they've talked to each other, and they've pretty much come up in their own mind what the scenario was. And when you ask them what happened, that's what they're going to tell you, what they come up in their own mind, what the scenario was. And they've already filtered the evidence to be what they want it to be to come up with theirs. And that's without saying, I'm trying to cover something up, which could be. So it's really difficult because you just can't, unless there's a video, or audio recordings or equipment recordings that you can go by and see exactly what happened. It's very tough if you've just got interviews to go off of to say what happened.
Yeah. Or when you don't even have video interviews because if the crew, in this case, thankfully the crew was all accounted for.
Yeah, the ship isn't at the bottom of the ocean someplace.
Well, at the bottom of the bay.
Right. I'm just saying that it is salvageable.
It's the crew is safe on this, so you are able to interview them. But there's a lot of accidents where you lose a large portion of the people that were involved.
Key evidence dies with the people.
Yep. And so, again, in those scenarios, you're going to be working off of a lot of assumptions. And your evidence then is to try to gather as much evidence to lead you in a direction, but you may have to have in Taproot, we have the dotted boxes, and saying, okay, this is an assumption. I'm going to have to work off of this assumption.
Yeah, it's possible.
And so those are kind of things like, and again, I think back to that Lebanon explosion, because
there's nobody there who was on the ground, is there?
There's no one who was at that port that day that was alive.
No.
They all died. So we know there was a fire. We know there was a ton of fertilizer, and those two don't mix. Now, what we don't know is exact ignition points, exact causes of ignition. So again, you have to now work around this with what you do know. And so I always think I think this case will probably, once we get more details, will be one of those case studies that people use in the future. Just because of...
You're speculating on that.
Well, I can speculate on, is this a case that people will use in the future because it's a bridge in the United States collapsing from a maritime accident.
And people were killed.
And people were killed. And so I think it will be one used to look at in the future. Will they know in a month, in 6 and 3 years?
You say this. There was the bridge that collapsed. What, in Minneapolis was that it collapsed? And I bet if you went and asked people about that, they wouldn't have any clue nowadays what that was all about. They've long forgotten that accident, and nobody remembers that it even happened. And so it could be you think about this because you're an investigator. There may be other people out there who do root cause analysis.
People in maritime will
maybe true.
Yeah.
But how many years does it take them to forget? There was what was the name of the ship out in San Francisco Bay that ran into one of the bridges, which did not collapse, by the way. And they ended up, I think they put the captain in jail. That's a good corrective action, right? And so it's one of those, you just don't know what the long-term lessons learned are going to be, whether they actually find the root causes or not, and whether those will be remembered for future generations or not. So let's sum this up. What do you learn so far from this accident?
You shouldn't speculate.
Well, you can speculate. You shouldn't take any action based on the speculations.
You should follow the evidence.
You should follow the evidence if you're doing the investigation, not speculate and then go try to prove or disprove your theory.
And maybe lastly, and I'll say this, if you're wanting to understand how to do a investigation that is facts-based, not speculation, not bias-based.
Guided evidence-based.
You should attend a Taproot 5-day.
Oh, I like that answer.
Yeah, and that's our major investigation one, and it's going to give you the tools needed to do this investigation.
And you also learn in that course how to do minor investigations also. So It's not just major investigations. You learn how to do both, I'll call them simple incidents or less consequence incidents and major accidents.
Yeah. So,
where can they find out about this?
They can find out about it on our Taproot website. Links are in the description.
www.taproot.com.
Now, I want to say that we understand that people have passed away with this, that there is emergency response still ongoing.
No, they stopped looking for them.
They stopped it this morning.
They stopped looking for them.
We understand that there's a lot of families that have been impacted by this, and we don't want to see...
At least 6.
We don't want to see people go through these kinds of things. That's why we push for good root cause analysis. So again,
to prevent them from happening again.
If your company doesn't want these kinds of things to happen or doesn't want them to happen again, reach out to us. We will help make sure your program is set up for success in this.
Sounds good to me. That's everything?
That's everything.
We'll see you later.